Welcome to this segment of Introduction of the Scratch application. The goal of this lesson is to introduce the Scratch application and identify some of the key components of the interface of the Scratch application. Scratch is the application that we're going to use to write instructions for the computer to carry out a task. And then later on, we're going to use the Scratch application to write instructions for the Finch robot to carry out specific tasks. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to identify the different components of the Scratch interface. So the goal of this segment is, by the end of the segment, students will be able to explain the term programming and explain what is a program. Students will also be able to identify and explain the Scratch interface. To begin, before we look at the interface of the Scratch application, we're going to talk about just some key terms to get us started. When we talk about programming, and if you notice up here on the screen, I do have some slides so you can see the terminology. Programming is simply the process of writing a set of instructions for your computer to carry out a task. So programming is the process of writing or creating the code, or what we call the instructions. And the set of instructions that you write for the program to or the computer to carry out a task is called a program. Okay, so two very important key terms. Programming is the process of writing instructions for the computer to carry out a task, and the program is the actual set of instructions for the computer to carry out a task. When you start programming, there are two very important skill sets, and that is your critical thinking, which is one, and that is thinking outside of the box, or thinking out of the box. And that is where you review all of the information or facts that you have about something, and then you form a judgment. The second skill set is what we call logical thinking. Logical thinking is relying on all of that information or the facts and data that you have about something to come to a decision. So when we talk about programming in Scratch, it's going to require those two very important skill sets. You got to have critical thinking skills, and then you got to have the logical thinking skills. So now let's start looking at the Scratch environment or the Scratch interface. Okay, Scratch is an application that can be used to program your own interactive stories. You can create games, you can create animations, and you can also create instructions for a robot to carry out specific tasks. Okay. Also in the Scratch environment, you can share all of your creations or all of your projects with other users. The Scratch application runs through a web browser. So to open the Scratch application, you must go to the website scratch.mit.edu. And when you type that into a web browser, the recommended web browser would be Google Chrome. Okay, so Scratch works best with Google Chrome. So if you just look here, when you go to scratch.mit.edu, the first step is to make sure that you sign in. Okay. And then once you sign in or click on sign in, as you can see here, next, once you sign in and you are verified, you're going to click on create to create a new Scratch program or Scratch project. So once you log in and you get into Scratch, next you're going to look at the interface. And this is what the interface is going to look like. So when you log into Scratch, you're going to be presented with the Scratch interface. Now within the Scratch interface, there are three main areas or three main components. The first component, as you can see here, is what we call the stage area. In the stage area, this is where you're going to have a little character, which is what we call a sprite. And this character is going to carry out or perform all of the instructions that you create in the Scratch application. So whatever instructions you give for the computer to carry out, that character is going to perform it for you so you can see what the computer will be doing or what that robot will be doing. So the first area is what we call the stage area. And if you notice here, the sprite or the character that we're going to start with is like a little cat. Okay, and that is what we call a sprite. Okay, the second area, if you look below, that is called the sprites and the backdrop area. Okay, the sprites and the backdrop area. So what that area does, it shows you what type of sprite that you're going to use in the stage area to carry out all of those instructions that you're going to create. The backdrop means that whatever you want in the background, you can have a picture, you can have a solid color. And if you notice here, I just have white in my background. I just have white. But you can actually create a space scene. You can create like a water scene. You can have a desert. You can have a forest. You can have a beach. You can have whatever backdrop that you desire for your program. And then, of course, the sprite is the character or the type of character that you're going to use just to show how the instructions will be carried out. So that is the second area. And then the third area of the Scratch interface is what we call the script area. And that would include this whole area here. Okay, all of that would be your script area. The script area is where you would actually have all of your instructions. Okay, this is where you're going to place all of your instructions in sequence or in order for the computer or the robot to carry out the task. If you notice in the script area, we have what we call code blocks. And these are all of the instructions that you can add to your script area for the program to carry out a task. At the very top of your code block, you have all of the different categories. For example, you can make different sound. You can make it move. There are certain things that control when the computer is going to carry out the task. And that's what we call events. So that is the code block, okay? And it contains all of the instructions that you can add to your script area for the computer to carry out a task. And then at the very top, you have your scripts menu. You got costumes, and then you have your sounds menu, okay? And that is where you can just enhance, so you can make that character do more things in your program. So when we talk about the Scratch interface, when you get ready to start writing instructions for the computer to carry out a task, there are three main components. You have the stage area, and in the stage area, you have a character or what we call a sprite that's going to carry out all of your instructions. It's going to show you what instructions that you've created, how the computer would carry out that task. The second main area is what we call the sprites and the backdrops area. And this just shows what type of sprite that you have created or placed in the stage to see the instructions being carried out. And then the backdrop would be your background, okay, whatever you design for your background. And then the third area of the Scratch interface is what we call the scripts area. And this is where you're going to place all of your instructions for the computer to carry out a task. Okay, so in summary, the Scratch application is an application that allows you to write instructions for the computer to carry out a task. Later on, we're going to use the Scratch application to write instructions for a Finch robot to carry out tasks. And there are three main areas of the Scratch interface. That is the stage area, the sprites and backdrops area, and then you have the scripts area. So that concludes the introduction of the Scratch interface. Thank you for watching. Oof. How long was